I want to throw out a word I hope isn't threatening. The word is innovation. I think it could be threatening because I'm talking to a room of professionals, and what I really think success can look like is when we go past the professional world and people begin to take responsibility for Jewish life. I would call that the basis of innovation. And Sean is here in the room, and he might have a better definition. He's done quite a lot of study of it, but I think that's what the rumblings of success will look like. When people begin to take over communal functions and communities and do it in an innovative way, I know that this is a threat to given establishments and institutions, and we have to work out that balance, but that's what it would look about. However, that's merely the symptom. I think the real success will be when Jews begin to understand themselves and can articulate in the world of ideas, and I'm saying that as a response to a bit of conversation that I had together with Johnny. We have to, by transposing what we are into the world of ideas, we can begin to communicate. As long as we're a religion, belief makes conversation stop. Being a people, conversation stops. Being a nationality, conversation stops. We have to transpose all of the things that we are into a language that can both convince us and others. What is so precious about this Jewish entity that it should be continued? I'll just give you a snippet. As one of the Paideia Fellows said to me, I'm so proud to be an Ivri. What does Ivri mean? Ivri means someone who passes over, meaning always in motion, who, as opposed to Eastern methodologies, doesn't accept the world as it is restless. Or as Mordechai Kaplan once said, Judaism should comfort the trouble and trouble the comfortable. And I think that that notion of somehow not accepting the world as it is as a core value of what we are, and to be able to work to, in dignity, repair it or build it, is one of the elements of what it is to be a Jew. And I think we have to be able to put what it is to be a Jew into a language that can be communicated.
In Birkat Hamazon, grace after meals, there's that phrase where we thank God for feeding everybody. And part of me that knows that there is significant hunger in Israel, in Jewish communities all over the world, in the world. There is just significant numbers of people that go to bed at night hungry. How on earth do we say, thank God for feeding everybody? And the only way that I can really understand it is one of the ways of answering about what is the definition of success, which is that we're shaking our fist at the world, saying thank you for what we've just eaten, but we will not rest until all have eaten. And it captures for me this notion that our heritage, spiritual, cultural, political, however you choose to get at it, has profound ethical insights that lead us to live the good life, firstly. Secondly, anyone who was involved in the mass Russian emigration to this country, the million Jews after 1990, knows full well the government could do whatever the government could do. The Jewish communities around the world, through the various agencies of the Jewish people, could do whatever they could do. None of them could take a cup of tea to their new neighbor next door. This is going to lead us to the point where we have to say, let's recognize, and maybe this is the next conference in 4 years' time, what are pro-ams? What are amateurs, volunteers, but they're functioning and trained and skilled enough to act as though they are professionals? We see more and more of these people around the Jewish community, and I think we're all a lot better off because of that. was going to say, it's not that dramatic. And somehow to figure out how can we unleash the enthusiasm of all of those people that need to do the various equivalents of take a cup of tea next door to their neighbor. That requires a huge number of people to do it. It shifts the role of the professional from what it is now to something else. And yet it honors the heritage that we have and helps us realize what is the Jewish voice and what it wants to bring to the big wide world. So that's one example of what success would look like for me.
Several of you asked Barbara to have a couple of minutes to explain just a little better what lies behind disassimilation. I think some of you were a little upset. I cut her short in her time, and here's an opportunity for her to explain just a bit better what she was getting at. Try it again.
Okay. I think, yes. Okay, good. Disassimilation is a phenomenon that perhaps characterizes Europe per se, but I think it has implications that go beyond Europe. It's the phenomena of people as adults claiming Jewish identity, coming out of usually very totally assimilated backgrounds, often the children of mixed marriages, very often having been unaware that they had any Jewish identity, and then, and this is critical, as adults, with an adult mind, choosing Jewish to become part of the Jewish manifold. Now, it's an incredibly enlightening experience for all of the Jewish people because it brings us to the basic questions. Why do people do that? What is so, as I indicated before, what is so attractive? What is so magnetic? What is so precious about the Jewish enterprise that people would risk their social currency, which essentially it means in Europe, in order to do this? First of all, I think that we have to point to a few factors. First of all, don't think assimilation should frighten us the way it does. I think it's a two-way street. And I think if we begin to take seriously what it is to bring people back into the Jewish manifold, what is so attractive? The wonderful thing is it makes us ask, what is so attractive about being Jewish? I can't tell you the number of people who I've told this to about this, and people say, you know, they say, why would someone want to be Jewish? I mean, Jews say that. And I think we have to be able to answer that question. And I think there are profound answers to that question, but I think we haven't allowed ourselves, and this is another strike against peoplehood, as though somehow we just belong to this entity. But behind it all, at least when we're facing the future, which I know we have to do as well, when facing the future, we must be able to answer that question. And that brings us back to core values. It brings us back to seeing Judaism as a worldview. A worldview is a collective response to life's existential questions. And I think we do have a worldview. I think when we put on the Jewish lenses, I think we see some remarkable things. I think we see joy in the light of tragedy. I won't go into it. But we do have to be able to answer it, and we can answer it, because this phenomena in Europe, which you must witness, because it's now part of the Jewish story. People coming back and saying, I want to be a Jew. Can I say one other thing, though, to be a Jew? I think very soon we're going to have to ask ourselves, re-ask ourselves, who is a Jew in light of the European experience? Many Europeans will not understand themselves religiously, and the only gateway into the Jewish people is a religious ceremony, to which one person said to me, I do not want to start to live my life as a Jew with a lie, because I'm going to be asked if I'm going to be observant. We have to re-examine what we mean by what is at the core of Jewish existence, and this, again, is part of the question of what it is, what and who it is to be a Jew. Let's begin to do what we do so well, ask questions, and because I think we have answers.
I just want to take the prerogative as a moderator just to indicate that I don't believe this is only a European phenomenon. When Jacob introduced me, he mentioned, asked how many of you had seen that New York had recently, just a week ago, published the Jewish Community Study of New York. I hope you'll take a chance to read it. I think it has implications beyond New York, significant for New York, but beyond New York. But one of the most interesting findings was that there was a statistically significant number of people who called themselves Jews. They did not have Jewish parents. That is, they did not have a Jewish mother or a Jewish father, and they did not go through conversion, and yet they considered themselves Jewish. So you ask, what's that about? Well, I was once married to a Jew, I'm not anymore, but I really got into it, I feel Jewish. There are all sorts of answers here, and I'm not talking about Jews by choice. I'm sorry, Jews by choice, separate category, they are Jews. Conversionary Jews were a separate category. These are people who never converted, and yet this phenomenon of identifying as a Jew is becoming more fluid. So it's not just Europe. I just want to... So we want to hear from you. What did you learn at your tables? What did you develop? Are there ideas that we can put forth to share with one another about opportunities as professionals to be jugglers on the roof, to develop initiatives that helps us both as fixers of the world and also enable us to be repaired? What is it about our enterprise that we share as professionals, Jewish professionals from around the world, that it's time for us to work on together? We talk about the mega event that Johnny mentioned for birthright people, and he says, you're professionals. If you haven't experienced it, you need to experience it. And that's true. It is a wow. I want to know what we can develop that are wows for other segments of our community that we can work on together. What are the new aha experience we can work on together? If anyone's come up with some ideas, please share them with one another. Who's going to be bold and come up and share what their table developed? Please.
I think there is an intensity of Jewish learning that appeals to people out there. We might say, oh, you know, they're part of those movements, whatever, the ones that used to be between the Reform and the Orthodox who were disappearing, whoever they were, with the C movement. As an example, there are hundreds of thousands of Jews, for example, for whom intensive learning, any group, that's your challenge. I thought, Yoni, the idea of the Daf HaYomi was quite brilliant. I think learning on some kind of an off and on sense, but taking people as serious students, we take you seriously. Since most of our community, the survey showed, and we know, is a more and more adult community. Adults like to learn things. Adults like to be treated like adults, which means we care what you say. You know, you might not know as, quote, as much Torah as the teacher, but you're a professional. You know what you know. So I think and people respond to that with an alacrity that I think we don't give people enough attention to. We should flood the community from all kinds of environments with teachers and experiences where we take you seriously as students. I think it would evoke something very deep.
Thank you. One of the critiques that we heard was that we're so busy talking to one another, we need to get out and understand better the people we're serving. This room is for professionals to be figuring this out. This doesn't preclude our going out with good ears and listening to what our community is looking for. Becky, please. It's not, but it usually has like a 5-second lag. So keep talking and let's see if it comes on.
Hi, I'm Becky Caspi and I'm speaking for table 4.
I think you're going to walk right over there to that mic, which we know works. The microphones will get you every time.
Hi, table 1. I'm Becky Caspi and I'm here speaking for table 4. So for us, I think the concept of the disassimilated was fascinating and really flows into some of the ideas which weren't necessarily programmatic, not down to that level, but they did certainly rise to the level of thematic and some guidelines that we thought would be very helpful. So in terms of the power that we have when we come together, we felt that it was really important to focus efforts on finding those people who shared the passion and the drive and the willingness to be together seeking the solutions. It didn't mean necessarily that we need to agree on every point or that we couldn't recognize the places where we differ, but that our focus ought to be on spending our time and our energies in the mix with other people who at least had that common desire to find solutions to whatever the issues were together, and that unfortunately we, as communal professionals of Table 4, didn't feel that there necessarily were additional resources that would allow us to deal with extremists. Not today, not now. To deal with extremists, those who don't even want to be in the conversation. So our theme from Table 4 was to find people who may vary wildly from us in their basic opinions and approaches, but who do want to be in the mix together seeking solutions.
Thank you. I want to offer just a couple of ideas that I'm going to wait 1 minute and give Sean a chance. Please. No, you have to go to the other one.
Sean Landris from Table 14. There were a number of issues which we discussed, but common to all of them, I think, was a wish to hear more from both Barbara and Johnny about how we are expected to engage the other, the non-Jew in particular. To cite an example that one person raised, sometimes the peoplehood conversation can convey the notion that a young Jerusalemite, a young Jewish Jerusalemite, has everything in common with a young Jewish person in Brooklyn and nothing in common with an Arab living 3 doors down the street. How, given, and this is a bit of a loaded question because I know your work, but could you each say a little bit more about how this plays out in a multicultural world?
Sure. The Chicago historian Martin Marty, he's a historian of Christianity. He describes in his work a spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum, we'll give it the title, is total mobility. Those people who are freed from all bonds, all ties, all roots, and absolutely move wherever the temptation is there. They change their practices, change their eating habits, change their partners, their spouses, their workplace, their countries, their language, at will, right? If they wish it, so it be. At the other end of the spectrum is total mobilization, as opposed to total mobility. These are the people who commit to following a particular leadership hierarchy and follow in the footsteps according to the parameters and rules and regulations that are set out for their group. Don't forget, I said this is a guy who's commenting on the Christian world. All right? His comment is that both ends of those spectrum are growing. The numbers of people that are total mobility are growing. The numbers of people who are total mobilization are growing. The middle is getting squeezed. I happen to believe that the future vitality of the Jewish people is going to be dependent upon those who are willing to sign up to partial mobility and partial mobilization. Partial mobility and partial mobilization. What does that mean vis-a-vis the non-Jewish world? That means, according to the 3 gateways that I outlined, we absolutely, as a Jewish group and as Jewish individuals, have to engage with the outside world. That's what the blessing of modernity has brought us, is the fantastic opportunity to do that. The downside of Jewish peoplehood and thinking in its simplistic sense is that you end up with lowest common denominator Judaism, and you end up with nothing to really say. In answer to Heschel's question, to be is to stand for, you end up not standing for anything. For peoplehood to thrive, both internally amongst the diverse Jewish people, in such a way that the partially mobile and partially mobile link to the totally mobilized and the totally mobile, only in that way can we actually have enough people that begin to interact smartly with non-Jews in a way that we stand for something. Now that doesn't require philosophical tractates and doesn't require all of that to be able to do that work, but it does mean that you have to have the confidence in a multicultural society to say, this is what I stand for, this is who I am, this is who at least a cluster of us are as we go out and about in our world.
Barbara.
Johnny, to continue what you said before, I think, and now let's keep this in the room because we can talk as professionals. I think that we lack a tremendous amount of confidence. And I think that lack of confidence is based upon the fact that we don't really feel literate in what it is to be Jewish. Literate. We can talk about forming communities of learning, but I think we first have to talk to ourselves. I think that we have to, even if it's only so that it's therapeutic, so that we can feel the confidence of being literate. We have to be literate in our own culture. Once we're literate, we can communicate it, Sean, to the outside world, and we can form formats where that can take place in a meaningful way. Let's not be afraid of the intellectual. By the way, that's another thing I sort of find that in talking with people, somehow you talk about the world of ideas and people start to feel very shaky. Don't. We all have wonderful ideas. And I think that we have to empower ourselves as professionals to be both literate, articulate, and intellectual. I think one of the ways of reaching out, that's number one. That's how we reach out. We have to be able to talk, like I said before, about what Judaism is. We don't feel equipped. We can talk to Jews. Can we talk outside of Jews? Can we talk about, like the great thinkers of the last century could. You could talk to a Dubnov and he would tell you what Judaism was. We don't do that anymore. That's number one. Number two, I would place, if I were going to make a bet about how we will communicate with the outside world, let's celebrate and utilize the arts. The arts, by virtue of what they are, both have to be universal in nature and yet particular. No good art is either only particular or only universal. It's a wonderful combination of both. And I would use the arts and culture, be it theater, film, the visual arts, the plastic arts altogether. I think we have to develop, if you want, if you want to make it programmatic, cultural festivals in which we interchange with other cultures. By the way, this is, of course, the notion of culture. When we say culture, we can either mean bagels and lox or we can mean the arts. And I think we have to more elevate ourselves to the notion of the arts. That's number one. And the second is through formats for learning and for gaining confidence in ourselves and who we are. We're the people of the book. If we don't know the book, we don't have to abide by it. We don't even have to quote it. We just have to feel confident in it. So those are the two areas I think that as professionals we have to work on. That would be my recommendation.
Go ahead.
My grandmother spent by far the majority of her life in the East End of London, which was the British equivalent of the Lower East Side, when people got to Britain from Europe. The only situation in which she felt comfortable was in a room full of Jews. The only situation in which she felt comfortable was a room full of Jews. For her, next generation down, my dad, absolutely relished the possibility of going off to university when the time came, and deliberately chose a university far away from the Lower East Side, the East End of London, in order to encounter the range of cultures and people and ideas that were out there. The next generation down is yet again filled with people who are busily experiencing and learning different languages, different cultures, traveling places in a way in which my dad and certainly his mum could never even imagine. One of the things we can learn from this is that you have to go through the process of learning how to actually engage in a smart way with all sorts of other cultures, including your own. One of the great examples of this is the Limud conference, certainly in the UK and probably in other places too. I'm just less familiar. There are some non-Jews that come to the conference. And it gives a great opportunity both to the non-Jews and to the massive Jews that are there to start checking the boundaries, the porous boundaries that Elisa spoke about at the beginning. And in many ways, Limud for me, even though Limud did not set out to become this, and even though they might not even recognize fully that that is what they are, Limud is a 5-day festival of Jewish peoplehood in the following sense. You know, if you pray every day, then you thank God for taking you out of Egypt. If you pray with intentionality, why then do you need Pesach? Pesach is just thank God for getting us out of Egypt. What was the experience of slavery? And the rabbis in their wisdom understood that actually human beings can't actually pray with intentionality in that intense way every day. That you need an annual boost of intensity in order to bring this to start. Limud provides that annual festival of Jewish peoplehood. And perhaps one of the practical tasks around for us is, what are other examples of that which provide that level of intensity but also have a measure of the interaction between Jews and non-Jews in order to better help people come out to the non-Jewish world without sacrificing what their own heritage is, but to do it with a measure of confidence in a way that goes beyond cultural literacy to a sense of cultural intimacy. And in an intimate relationship, it's not that everything's good, and you don't defend everything. But in an intimate relationship, there is a healthy critique that builds the relationship for the long haul.
Thank you. This is hard stuff, and I want to thank all of you for grappling through this with us. I think Johnny's last comment brings a contemporary perspective on the fact that it's not either or. We are of a blessed group of professionals who are not, we don't need to choose. And to the extent that we run the risk of going so far in the ethnic mode that we do become isolated from the societies and the cultures in which we inhabit. Barbara rightly warned us that that leads to the collapse of the triangle, and it's our job really to understand how we hold these in tension. This is nuanced stuff. I don't know how many of you came into the room with expectations of leaving with more practical answers. I hope you weren't disappointed. We did not get there, although I hope we continue in this mode to have conversations with one another. Limud UK is but one example of hundreds of initiatives going on that I'm aware of, that so many of you are engaged in, but we need to think together strategically about how we can build to the next level. I want to thank all of you for participating, and I know you thank the speakers who really engaged us and challenged us in very important ways. I've been asked to announce, as this session ends, that all of you who are attending tonight's social event must wear your name tags in order to gain admittance. Thank you all very much.